The mission statement of Emma is to resurrect, research, study, practice, and instruct in the combat skills, philosophies, and principles of European medieval martial artists, striving to achieve a level of skill and understanding consistent with the medieval combatant in both technology and in ideals. In my own words, we're trying to recreate the knowledge, skills, and equipment of a medieval swordsman. Our current sources that we study and why are Fiore de Oliveri and George Silver. Fiore de Oliveri gives us the examples of how to fight in the plays. George Silver gives us additional context in the dynamics and the principles of how to fight, which explains more of what we know of Fiore. Some of us also study 133 or I-33, which is sword and buckler from the 12th century, as well as Bolognese masters such as Dall'Agocchi, which includes footwork and ideas for provocations. All of these sources, George Silver, 133, Bolognese masters, etc., provides further context for a deeper understanding of Fiore de Oliveri's work. Why did Emma choose Fiore as the primary source? His manuscripts have given us a comprehensive martial arts curriculum with body mechanics across the different weapon sets. He has a logically laid out system that covers grappling all the way through dagger, sword, spear, poleaxe, out of armor, in armor, and miscellaneous weapon sets, right up to mounted combat. The significance of Fiore de Oliveri is that he had enough impact to have at least 4 manuscripts, which were at the time expensive to make, and those were kept and treasured and lasted until today. His manuscripts are among the earliest medieval fight books. And there's noble duels of the people that he trained that are also recorded separately to collaborate his work. Fiore de Oliveri's manuscript have allowed us to recreate how to fight like a medieval swordsman. The life of Fiore de Oliveri. First of all, everything we know about Fiore de Oliveri comes from his own manuscripts. Anything outside of that is really conjecture. So from the introductions to the manuscripts, Fiore de Oliveri was born in Cividale de Friuli in the Friuli region of northern Italy around 1350, because the Pisani d'Ossi is dated 1409 and states that Fiore de Oliveri trained for 50 years, and people generally started training around age of 10. The introduction tells us that he began training at a young age, studying with Italian and German masters, specifically mentioning that he trained under Johannes Sevenus, known as the Swabian, who in turn studied under Toblin. 7 students are mentioned in the introductions as having been trained by Fiore de Oliveri and surviving their duels. This shows that the art is teachable. Fiore de Oliveri claims to have fought 5 duels with masters who were not good enough to be even his students, so he refused to fight them, provoking duels with only a doublet, leather gloves, and sharp swords. In the introductions, Fiore says he survived all of them unscathed with his honor intact. The manuscripts are dedicated to Nicola III of D'Este, Marquis of Ferrara, Modena, and Parma. We have access to 4 manuscripts, which I'll talk about in a minute, and it's thought that he has died after 1409, which is the Pisani d'Ossi, the date that in the Pisani d'Ossi, as in the later Florius, or Latin, or Paris manuscript, it mentions the late Fiore de Oliveri. Next, for the manuscripts of Fiore de Oliveri, the treatises are organized into sections, from grappling through dagger, sword, spear, poleaxe, mounted, etc. Each section begins with crown masters who teach us opposta, and remedy masters with actions against your opponents, and then scholars for follow-on actions. There are four known surviving manuscripts that we have access to: the Getty, the Morgan, the Pisani d'Ossi, which is also called the Novati, and the Florius, also known as the Paris or Latin. The nicknames for each of them typically come from where they currently reside. Starting with the Getty, It's in the Getty Museum in LA, written in Italian. This is the primary source that we use at Emma. It's ordered from wrestling, and then dagger, sword, then sword, spear, and poleaxe and armor, and then mounted. It has detailed descriptions of the plays, which are easier to understand than some of the other sources. Next, we have the Morgan, which is in the Morgan Museum in New York. It's written in Italian. It's ordered from mounted, and then sword, spear, and poleaxe and armor, then sword and armored, then dagger, and then wrestling. And there's sections of the wrestling and the dagger section that are missing. Also of note, there are parts of the manuscript where the images had silver applied, which have turned black over time. Next, we have the Pisani Dossi manuscript. This is in the Pisani Dossi family collection. It's written in Italian in rhyming couplets. It states in the introduction that it's dated to 1409. It has two introductions, one in Latin and one in Italian. It was copied by someone named Novati. So all we have is his copy of this manuscript. And it's ordered from wrestling, and then dagger, sword and armor, sword, spear, and poleaxe and armor, and then mounted. It also has a few extra plays than the Getty, so it's a good secondary source to support the Getty. Lastly, we have the Florius, also known as the Latin or Paris, which is written in Latin and in the National Library in France, in Paris. This is a later copy. As stated in the introduction, it says, mentions the late Fiore de' Liberi, mentioning from which we can conclude it's written after 1409. It has colored illustrations. However, it has many errors and issues. The text is difficult to understand even after the Latin is translated into English, and many of the illustrations and some of the text in the plays do not match the other three manuscripts. Next, continuing on, let's look at the requirements for abrazare, wrestling. This may be discussed in the history and theory section, or it might happen at the beginning of the application section of wrestling. However, we have strength, speed, knowledge of, advantageous holds and grapples, locks and breaks, binds, such as keys, which can lead to dislocations, strikes of malice, such as to the temple, eyes, throat, guts, nuts, crotch, right? As well as throws. Another section that could come up in either the theory section or later in the practical section is talking about the signal page, where we have the four animals in the signal page in the manuscripts. So we have prudentia, represented by lynx holding calipers, which is foresight, caution, measure, I would also say knowledge. Celeritas, with a tiger holding an arrow, representing speed, swiftness. Fortitudo, represented by an elephant with a castle on its back, which is strength and stability. Audatia, which is courage. And in the Pisani Dossi, Fiore de' Liberi states that courage is the most important virtue. However, we need all of these. Also in the manuscripts are the 7 strikes of the sword that will be gone through in the practical section of the sword, as well as the different posta. These could be represented, in the signal page, we see the 7 strikes of the sword, the 7 swords, and in the Pisani Dossi, there are names of specific posta beside those 7 swords as well. Next, so that goes through Fiore de' Liberi, as well as a little bit of additional information that may happen related to the manuscripts in the history and theory section or later in the practical. Next, I'm going to go on to Life of George Silver. So who was George Silver? He's one of the main people that we study to gain more context on Fiore de' Liberi. So George Silver was active roughly from the 1550 to 1620. He's an English gentleman, a fencing master, and extremely xenophobic Englishman who wrote Paradoxes of Defense, published in 1599, and brief instructions upon my Paradoxes of Defense, written around 1604, but not published until the 18th century. George Silver, in addition to being a raging xenophobe, also specifically hated the Italian rapier masters in England at the time, who were becoming very fashionable at court. He felt that these Italian rapier masters were teaching unsafe ways to fight, which were causing Englishmen to die needlessly. The key concepts from George Silver that we study is, first of all, the principle of the true fight, to strike without being struck. Then true times, time of the hand and body, time of the hand, body, and foot, time of the hand, body, and feet, which allows us to present a threat before a target to help us to strike without being struck. The threat that we present provokes the opponent to react, and we do that before we present them with a target that they can strike. Next, we have the grounds. The 4 grounds are judgment, distance, time, and place. Judgment of the relative attributes of myself and my opponent's size, age, equipment, reach, etc. Then allows me to determine the distance that I need in order to strike without being struck, which gives me the time that I need to strike without being struck, which gives me the place on my opponent that I can strike them without in turn being struck myself. The governors, the next set of concepts, there are 4 governors. Judgments, which includes all of the grounds and is what you use to know how and when you can safely attack. Then measure, using your judgment in real time to see opportunities where you can strike without being struck, as well as seeing threats from your opponent. And then the twofold mind, which uses the last 2 concepts, which are pressing in when you have an opportunity and there are no threats to you, and immediately flying out as soon as there is any threat to you. So you put this all together, you press in when you've won the place, you fly out when there is any danger of your opponent winning the place on you. Now, why do we use silver? Right? Fiore the Very, 14th century Italian swordsman. George Silver is a 16th century English swordsman. Although George Silver is 2 centuries later, he uses terminology that helps us to better understand and explain how to fight as safely as possible and provides more context on the work of Fiore de la Barre, which seem to share George Silver's philosophies of fighting safely. Fiore de la Barre does not give us enough detail of his underlying theory, so we use George Silver's concepts in order to better understand Fiore de la Barre's manuscripts. One last part that may be in the history and theory section, or it might pop up later on in the test, is parts of the sword. So we have the tip, the strong, weak middle of the blade, going through the crossguard, and the tang going under the hilt into the pommel. We have the true and the false edge. The true edge is the knuckle side, the false edge is the back side, the non-knuckle side, the thumb side. If you turn the sword around, now the knuckle side now is the new true edge, and the back is the false edge, etc. So it's how you hold the sword, not an attribute of the sword itself. And typically the false edge is a little bit faster to react. The true edge is a little bit stronger on the strike. We also have the balance point, which is typically 2 to 3 inches out from the crossguard. If it's a little bit more than 3 inches, then it'll be a little bit blade heavy and a little bit less point responsive. If it's less than 2 inches, then you have a little bit more point responsive and less blade heavy. We also have the center of balance can also be called the center of gravity. So same thing. That is the point at which 2 to 3 inches out from the crossguard, the sword wants to rotate. So as we're cutting and thrusting, we're moving behind that point of rotation. Next, we have the center of percussion. There's 2 spots at the center of percussion. So you hit the pommel, not the blade. You hit the pommel to get the vibration to go. And then you'll see 2 points of percussion. One approximately a third of the way down the blade where there's less vibration, and one right down near the crossguard, near your hand. And these 2 points of percussion means that there's the least amount of vibrational energy lost. And so it's most efficient in theory on translating energy from your hand to the point on the blade, a third of the way down to half of the way down the blade, where it impacts under a cut. Another fun thing that usually happens in the history and theory is somebody will ask, which part of the sword can you use to kill or to damage your opponent? Anything. All parts of the sword. The part with blood on it, right? The point, the edge, the crossguard, the pommel, whatever, right? So this concludes the, basically I'm just taking the history and theory guide that we've developed and just reading it out loud and adding a few minor points here and there that are my own thoughts on the matter. I highly recommend that every person getting ready for a Scholar Test take a look at this Scholar Test Theory Study Guide. If you don't have one, let me know. I'll send it to you. Read through the introductions, ideally all of the introductions for the manuscripts that we have. If you don't have those, let me know. I'll send them to you. And then go through this, right? Maybe print out the History Theory Guide, put little pencil notes in for your own, Michaelisms or Antonisms or Nickisms or Bruceisms or whatever, your own little points. Don't add too much. Keep mostly to this because this is what I put together initially and then Murph edited. So that's what I would recommend. Go through and make a video like this. See if you can get it. See if you can get my time limit. I was a little bit talkative and I got 15 minutes. See if you can keep it to a tight 10 minutes, right? And then rinse and repeat like Mike Pennington did. Go through, listen to it, make notes, make a new one that's even tighter and cleaner. Make sure that you have the points coming out like bullets from a gun. And then once you get it cleaned up after 2 or 3 passes, send it to your instructor at your club or send it to me if you want, and we will give feedback. Okay? Anyway, cheers.